The Chinese Lunar New Year is not only a good time for celebration and inviting good luck, but it is also an opportune time to honor the Chinese Filipino heritage. This morning, we'll get history and cultural lessons from the one and only Richard Chu, a professor in Chinese in the Philippines history at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. It's a beautiful day, Professor Chu. Thank you very much for joining us.
Well, good morning to all of you. It's nighttime here, but it's a pleasure to be here.
You know, we're getting lessons all the way from Boston, Massachusetts, so thank you so much. First off, the history of the Philippines and the Chinese community goes back way back, probably some of the oldest connections between anyone living in the Philippines before it was even called the Philippines is with China. So how far back can we trace the very first Chinese community in the Philippines?
Well, actually, there has been no record of a real or big Chinese community in the Philippines until the Spaniards came over. However, there's evidence that there was trade between the natives of the different islands here, of what we now call the Philippines, between them and the Chinese in the southern part of China. And this is through some archaeological artifacts that have been discovered in various parts of the Philippines, dating these objects back to the 9th century, 10th century. So it may even be earlier than that, but we do have evidence from archaeological sites that there had been trade between the Chinese and the natives of these islands centuries before the Spaniards colonized the Philippines.
You know, Prof, now that it's Chinese New Year and even weeks leading to Chinese New Year, people have been flocking to Binondo, you know, getting their ongpin treats in time for the Chinese New Year celebration. Can you tell us, Prof, what is the origin of Binondo?
Binondo is actually an island because it's surrounded by water. So it's an islet, if you'd like to call that. So in 1594, the Governor General of the Philippines then, Dasmariñas, donated or gave the island to the Chinese who converted to Catholicism. So the idea there was that by giving the island for these Chinese Catholics and their families to live on, that they could create a community of faithful Spanish subjects and Christians. So those who converted were given this opportunity to live on Binondo, and they were also It was also tax free. So there were these incentives given by the Governor General in order to uh, to encourage the creation of a Chinese Christian community. And the hope was that aside from creating loyal subjects of Spain, that they would also create Christian Chinese mestizos who would help the Spanish friars in their evangelization efforts in China. So that's how Binondo was created. It was a community largely made up of Catholic Chinese and their families, uh, in contrast to the Parian, which is across the Pasig River, where most of the unbaptized Chinese lived.
And Prof, I just learned yesterday actually that Binondo is the oldest Chinatown in the Philippines.
In the world, actually.
In the world. Okay, yeah. And I had no idea. How did that happen to be the oldest Chinatown in the world?
Well, Chinatowns are created in communities outside of China, right? And so um, the reason why it was the earliest was that when Spain colonized the Philippines, it created Manila as the capital and also as the major entrepot for the Manila Acapulco galleon trade, which started in 1565. Now, the galleon trade brought all these goods from China and from other parts of Asia to Acapulco, and the Chinese were the ones who played a major role in that galleon trade. So, with that, more and more Chinese started to to live or establish themselves in Manila, and that made it the first and the oldest Chinatown in the world, because no other place had a similar draw for the Chinese to live outside of China, um, except for Manila.
You know, Prof, the one thing that I love about how the Chinese and Filipino cultures melded is basically the food. The Chinese food influence in Philippine cuisine. We have words that are Chinese that have become really, it feels Filipino pero hindi talaga eh. I mean, like when we talk like yung mami or yung ginupit na noodles, you talk about all of that. All of that has such Chinese influence. Just how deeply how deeply, I guess, set is Chinese culture in Filipino cuisine because of our long-term relationship?
Oh, I think that you cannot speak of Filipino food without referring to Chinese food. So that's how set it is. Because, for example, the ingredient toyo, no,
Yeah.
which is in Hokkien, is derived from China, and all the other ways of not just the ingredients, but also in the way of cooking, and the kind of food that we serve, from pancit, from lumpia. These are all influenced by Chinese cooking. So you cannot speak of Filipino cuisine without referring to, for example, pancit or lumpia. Uh, and so that's how ingrained Chinese influence is, or Chinese food is in Filipino food.
Yeah, we even call lumpia Shanghai. Eh.
Lumpia Shanghai,
yeah,
yes, yes.
just when you look at that. But at the same time, when you look at the ingredients used, you mentioned toyo being a part of it. Just how is there any dish in particular that some people don't realize has Chinese origins when you look at Filipino food? You know, we did mention lumpia a while ago. I think that's a bit obvious. Pero may iba pa ba?
I guess yung pancit, or is it, say, arroz caldo, the way we cook the rice. No, arroz caldo is, although it's Spanish sounding, I think it has a large similarity to the congee that the Chinese have.
Okay,
Oh,
so
we
arroz
learned
caldo,
something
arroz
today.
caldo. Is a
Chinese
dish.
pala.
No, no, no,
Ang
I knew
arroz
that.
caldo.
I knew that.
You knew that? But you don't know
Wow.
what an abacus is?
I mean, listen, we're skilled and we know some stuff. You know some stuff. That's why we're here. We're combining knowledge.
But now that, talking about food is making us so hungry, I actually read an article yesterday, Prof, about the 5 lucky food items that you should be eating on the first day of Chinese New Year, and kasama dun yung dumpling, and they said yung kung ilan dumpling ang kainin mo, that's how much money you're gonna make for the next 12 months. So kailangan kumain tayo ng maraming dumplings today. Do you believe that, Prof?
No, I also know that, for example, you should eat the number of dumplings based on your age. So
Based on your age?
Based on your age. Wow,
Yeah.
ang daming
Ang
dumplings
dami
yan, ha?
kong kakainin na dumplings,
So if
Prof.
you're like 50 years old, then you should eat 50 dumplings. So I don't know
Oh my
if that's
Challenge
doable.
accepted. I love dumplings.
Okay.
Crazy.
I think we're ordering dumplings after this.
We are. And while we're ordering that, Prof, can you tell us, how do we honor our Filipino-Chinese heritage?
I guess, first of all, by recognizing that there is a significant population of Filipinos with Chinese ancestry, and then also acknowledging that there are these festivals, these religious or otherwise, that are also important to the Chinese Filipino community. And so by making, for example, Chinese New Year a national holiday, I think we are acknowledging the Chinese culture, and also realizing that what is Filipino, whether in terms of food or even practices, has also been influenced by Chinese culture. So I think by recognizing these things, then we are honoring the Chinese influence in Filipino culture.
And do you think, Prof, that Fil-Chis are represented well and accurately in Philippine media?
I think compared to my generation, I think there is more visibility of Filipino Chinese. But in terms of accuracy in portraying them, I don't think so, because still what you get in movies like Manupo tend to portray a kind of one-sided view of the Chinese, which is that the Chinese Filipino community they come from wealthy families, they practice certain traditions, but that's not true, because the Filipino-Chinese community is heterogeneous. You know, there are may mayaman, may mahirap. There are people who who don't speak Chinese or don't practice any of the Chinese rituals anymore. So I think that the media has to be more nuanced in their depiction or portrayal of the Chinese Filipinos.
Does it help that there are a lot of Filipino-Chinese, those of Philippine-Chinese heritage actually, who are media personalities, who are pushing a more positive view of that particular culture we have here in the Philippines?
It certainly is a good step, you know, a good first step. You do have, I'm happy to have these stars who are of Chinese Filipino descent becoming very popular. But then it shouldn't stop there. I think we need to get out of the stereotype, so that in this way we humanize the Chinese Filipinos, you know, and we don't stereotype them, because stereotyping is really not a very healthy thing.
Prof, of course, now that we're done with the showbiz, we got to talk about some of the serious business here. Unfortunately, there has been a lot of relationship or a lot of news between the Philippines and China as of late, especially with the issues of pogos, with the West Philippine Sea, and all of that discussion. How do you see the relationship between the Philippines and especially the Philippines Chinese, and how it's affecting here in the country, considering all of the news that has been happening in the past few months and even years?
I think this news unfortunately has a negative impact on the Chinese Filipino community, because many Filipinos tend to lump together the Chinese Filipinos and Chinese nationals, thinking that Chinese Filipinos are all loyal to China, that they're pro-China, and that they participate also in all these nefarious or criminal activities that we read about. This is not to say that Chinese Filipinos are not capable of those, you know, but by lumping them together and saying that they are not loyal to the Philippines, that's really harming the Chinese Filipino community, because that's further from truth, you know, for many of the Chinese who were born and raised in the Philippines. So all these negative press about the conflict in the West Philippine Sea, the pogos, and the spies, for example, these are not these have a negative impact on the Chinese Filipino community, which may lead to further discrimination, and which actually we have been seeing in some respect, about how the Chinese Filipinos have also been targeted, uh, as you know, with discrimination.
Is there a way in your opinion, to combat that? Because obviously there are some people who look at Filipino-Chinese and don't really see the Filipino part of it, and more of the Chinese part of it, especially with the negative news happening between the relationships between the Philippines and China. Is there a solution in your mind to try and, I guess, placate all of this negativity?
It's there are short-term and long-term solutions. Short-term would be like what you're doing, which I actually laud, you know, by using social media, and then discussing all these complexities and realities on the ethnic relationships between Chinese and Filipinos. And the long term would be through education, really. We need to add in our curriculum the history of the Chinese in the Philippines, so that the mainstream Filipinos would know this long and varied history of the Chinese in the Philippines, and you know, they can sift the truth the facts, from the information that have been perpetrated in media and all the other media outlets, so that they know what that the Chinese in the Philippines are also Filipinos by heart,
Yes.
that they're different from Chinese nationals.
Prof, I want to pivot to a more lighter side of this interview. I would like to ask you, because I know every year, especially during Chinese New Year, charms are such a big thing, especially people wear them for bracelets, and every year I think they change. Can you tell us the origin about the lucky charms?
Oh, well, I'm sorry, I probably am not the expert to talk about that, but I guess charms would be related to bracelets or pieces of jewelry that have, for example, are made of jade, as you are showing there. So I think that certain kinds of stones are considered lucky. Stones or even gold, are considered lucky in the Chinese culture.
Another thing that I'm curious about, Prof, is paano ba nagsimula yung pagbigay ng tikoy every time they're celebrating Chinese New Year,
Kasi
right?
sir, humihingi ng tikoy
No,
si Ann.
I'm not. It's just that my Chinese friends, they always give us tikoy. So we get boxes and boxes of tikoy. How did this all start?
I think I haven't really read any specific study on that yet, but I am not saying that there is. But I could say that even way back in the Spanish colonial period, where the Chinese are known to not only to celebrate Chinese New Year, but also to give gifts to other people. So over time, it may be tikoy, it may be other things, but I think in the more recent times, it has become more popular, I guess, to give tikoy. And I think because the Filipinos have also warmed up or liked the taste, and I think that's why it has become popular in more recent times.
Prof, I know they asked you a lot lighter questions. I just want to ask one slightly nerdy question. Sorry, guys, because I'm genuinely curious to find out why the language of Filipino-Chinese is what it is. Because you take a look at Hong Kong, who would have a bit of Cantonese, there's Mandarin in other parts of the world, but pero dito sa Pilipinas, we do majority, or at least a big group of Filipino-Chinese, their dialect is actually Hokkien. Why is that so? Why is that the language that prevailed here in the Philippines in general?
I think because it's what you call chain reaction, so or chain migration. So the Chinese who migrated first to the Philippines came from the Hokkien region or the Minnan region in Fujian province. So they speak Hokkien, and so once they started going to or settling in the Philippines, they would also invite their family members or their kababayan, sa villages nila, their townsmates to come over. So that's what you call the chain migration, and more people from the same villages, same province came to the Philippines. Whereas in other parts of Southeast Asia, you have, for example, the Cantonese going to, let's say, Malaysia or other parts of Southeast Asia. So that's one explanation. Although there are some Cantonese speakers who also came to the Philippines. If you were to put a number to it, one might say that maybe the Chinese community in the Philippines is like 70% Hokkien and 30% Cantonese. But we don't hear people speaking Cantonese because the lingua franca in the Philippines is Hokkien. So that even Cantonese speakers learn how to speak Hokkien, and that becomes the predominant language being used.
So that was my own nerdy question I needed to ask before I let you go, Prof. Thank you so much for joining us over in Boston. He's from the University of Massachusetts. He's an University of Massachusetts Amherst professor. Richard Chu, thank you so much for joining us, and Happy Chinese New Year.
My pleasure. Happy Chinese New Year.